What we can assume is this guy knows his stuff. He knows his stuff because he demonstrated it by winning the Tiki and Tierney Bracket Challenge, encompassing March Madness. He won it all. His name is Chris Schreiber, 42 years old. He's a husband. He's a dad. He's got 3 young boys. He's coaching. He's a lawyer, so he's obviously pretty good stock in the classroom. Seems like a pretty good story. Pretty interesting storylines with his family, too. His dad played at Stanford freshman football and baseball during Jim Plunkett's time. So the way it went, you win, you come on. You can ask us anything you want. You get to co-host with us. We'll have a lot of fun. We've got a few questions for him as well. And our winner, Chris Schreiber, is with us here now on Tiki and Tierney. Chris, welcome, buddy. Congrats. What's happening, buddy?
Thanks, guys. It's a little early morning out here in Seattle. I'm drinking my coffee. I want to let you guys know I've been a fan since the TBD days.
Nice. Oh, wow. You go all the way back.
While, yeah.
Wow. Okay, there
really
you go.
Enjoyed your guys' show, and Tiki, my wife, is a big fan of yours from all your TV appearances as well. So.
I appreciate that. For those who don't know what TBD was, it was kind of to be determined, but it was also Tiki, Brandon, and Dana. Now, you have an interesting I think a lot of things going on in your world, as we've said, and we got a little bit of a background of you. But let me drop back to how you won this by winning the bracket challenge. What was your philosophy in picking the games that you picked, and ultimately how you won?
Well, I'm kind of a stats nerd guy, and I have some stats nerd sites that I rely on for numbers, particularly in basketball for the men's basketball tournament, because I don't watch all year, so I kind of get geared up for it when around tournament time. Mm-hmm. So I looked at these sites, picked the numbers, and then between that and listening to you guys, actually Tiki, listening to you made me pick the winner, which actually ended up pushing me over the top. So I picked North Carolina based on listening to you guys.
Hang on a second. Dial it down there, Chris. First of all, I picked Carolina as well.
But I think I picked first.
And secondly, with all due respect to the great Tiki, what I know about college basketball and what he knows can fit into a thimble compared to me. So come on, well, let's not placate the great Tiki Barber.
The problem is, Brandon, as you said, you can't assume everybody's listening all the time. I got in my car, I heard Tiki start to make the pick, and that's what it's kind of, fired it off.
I'll tell you, man.
See?
Yeah.
It's all about timing. Brandon.
Chris, let me ask you this, Chris. What do you love? And we've got a lot of things. I know, obviously, you have interest as a lawyer in the Eli Manning, this case going on. Okay, but we'll get to it. What do you love about sports radio, and what's a turnoff for you?
Generally I'm tuning in for football. I'm tuning in for not the hot takes, but the good takes. I like listening to people get in and have fiery opinions, but that are good, based in fact, and so they sound as if they know what they're talking about. I'm not a big fan of having callers, which is what I'm not going to try and go off here on a bunch of stuff, just giving my opinion.
I got you.
Listening to them spout off. I like getting the kind of insider takes that you guys provide. Mm-hmm. I love hearing Tiki's particular insights as a former pro athlete. I love Brandon's insights as from working in the various markets, being a college baseball player. I love how you guys work those kind of things in. I generally really appreciate listening to good ex-jocks hosts who can really communicate well. So that's why I really dig your show.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, we have some beef, and it's a couple years old, but we have some beef,
Good, because I got beef with him after you're done with, beefing him. I got something
College
for you.
World Series. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Vanderbilt takes down my Cavaliers, and that was the first championship that we've ever had an opportunity to have. Now, the good thing is, the following year, same matchup, we actually bested you guys at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I was going to say, and both were went all 3 games.
Yep.
They were both great series, really exciting college baseball. I like college baseball even more than pro baseball, really, getting into it, and particularly because of my Vanderbilt connections. I love watching those guys go out there. And they're struggling a little bit this year compared to the previous years, but I think that, they've got such a great program and get such good kids, it's going to be back in.
Chris, doesn't Vandy have a really unique, really cool left field wall, really high, and something really quirky and different out there? I feel like I've seen that on TV watching the SEC. Don't they have a nuanced left field fence, something wacky?
If they do, it wasn't there. I graduated in 2002, and unfortunately I haven't been back to check out a game since. And I know their basketball arena is actually pretty unique in the way it places the benches. But they do have, everything about Vanderbilt's pretty unique, actually.
That's a great school, no doubt. And we're talking to Chris Schreiber. So Chris won our Tiki and Tierney Bracket Challenge, and 42 years young, a lawyer. And you reference how I made a few stops in radio working my way up. You bounced around a little bit yourself. Here's my beef with you, okay? Not that you bounced around. I think that it certainly creates a well-rounded perspective.
Worldly.
But if I had this right, so you're in Bellevue now for almost a decade or so. But
Yep.
I know you started you grew up you were born in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
Then you moved to Utah, if I have that right. San Diego for college. So during your formative sporting years, you were a Bay Area resident, which I imagine that's the reason why you're a Raiders fan. But the way you communicated this to our producer, you're also a Seahawks fan. Nobody you can't have two NFL teams.
Oh yeah, well, see, I justify it this way. If the Raiders had stayed in the AFC West, or excuse me, if the Seahawks had stayed in the AFC West, then yeah, you're right, no way. But now they're in the NFC West, and also in my Bay Area time growing up, I was a contrarian. I grew up in a family full of 49er fans, and just being the kind of personality that goes on to become a lawyer, I hated the 49ers, and so
I can respect that. Okay,
yeah,
I can respect. But let me ask you this. But Chris,
now the Seahawks are a big rival of the 49ers.
That's right.
In addition,
well, they were. When the Niners were good.
Yeah, before the 49ers just imploded, which I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Your family has it. But if the Raiders play Seattle in the Super Bowl, who are you rooting for?
That's a tough call because now they both had championships. If it was before, when Seahawks hadn't.
Who are you rooting for?
But putting me on the spot, I'd go for the Raiders.
Yeah,
but see, now you're giving my wife ammo because I give her all sorts of the business because she was pulling for the Patriots against the Seahawks.
Yeah, no, my wife has this. I have the same.
No, by the way, you just gave us your first drop. Giving his wife the business. We'll chop that up, and now we got a little drop courtesy of Chris Schreiber here on Tiki and Tierney.
Appreciate you, Chris. You have the same problem I do. My wife. Does your wife know football though? Does she know what she's watching?
She does. She knows enough enough to ask really good questions. And she's a fan of the Patriots, and she's a fan of the Seahawks. She's a fan of kind of pro ball. Like I have this argument with her all the time. She's not a real football fan because she doesn't really into the game. She doesn't like college football. She doesn't care about other teams. She wouldn't sit down and watch a Jags game against the Dolphins or something. But she does for someone who is a big fan of the Patriots and the Seahawks. She gets into it. She knows the basics of the game. She knows the big stars, the big names, and she gets into the stories. Actually, I think her favorite thing about watching it is the human interest stories that come out in the beginning, like Russell Wilson and Ciara or something like that.
Yeah, I hear you.
She still knows it.
Yeah, no, you got it better than me then, because my wife is a Pats fan, but she has no idea or interest in watching the game. She just likes Tom Brady. So I mean,
yeah,
I got to deal with a Pats fan in a giant household, and she doesn't even know what she's. I can't even argue with her.
You better hope Brady plays forever, though. Otherwise, she's not going to like football at all. At least you get a little out to watch when the Pats are on.
You got the helmet catch and 2 Super Bowl wins over her, so you got that going for you.
Exactly, but Tom Brady has Giselle, and he's amazing. So when Samter reached out to you after you won, you had some things you wanted to talk about. So what's on your mind? Lead us for a couple of minutes here.
Well, I mean, you guys got into the Seahawks and the Raiders a little bit. And there's a story coming out right now that I think is really interesting about Marshawn Lynch wanting to come back into the NFL after taking a year off, and he was retired. They're going to work out a trade between the Seahawks and the Raiders, my two teams. And I wanted to, get your thoughts on that, Tiki. Particularly, I know you came back after you also walked out kind of before you were done, as it were, and came back, but it was a few years later. So I wanted to know if you had any kind of insights on maybe how tough it is, what he's thinking, what he missed that would make him want to come back.
Yeah,
like that.
It's interesting when I think about Marshawn Lynch because we had heard him start talking about wanting to walk away a couple of years before he did. It was permeating that locker room. They were always, lobbying him to stay. And I've always said, if you're thinking about retiring, you're kind of already halfway out the door. But after hearing and reading a lot about this, I think it was more just him not liking the organization. A lot, I think, that was going on was they were masking some maybe problem child things that were going on with the Seattle Seahawks. They love him, obviously, because he's amazing. But he was, he hasn't always been the easiest player. Now that he comes back, I think it's because he misses it. Right? I didn't miss it. I came back, 4 years after I retired, I believe it was, or something like that, because I was bored. Right? I wasn't doing anything. I was going through a divorce. I was like, man, what can I do? I wasn't working really in media. And so football was the thing that I fell back onto. Fortunately for me, there was the lockout. So I didn't even get a chance. And this opportunity with CBS came up, as well as starting my company, Thuzio. And so it was a good thing that I didn't come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it actually will be a good thing that Marshawn does come back because he's going to help. He's going to help the Raiders or wherever he lands.
Yeah, it's interesting you put your finger on that, because in the local media there was definitely, even through the Super Bowl years, there's been an undercurrent of kind of factionality in the Seahawks locker room between, I guess, like a Russell Wilson on one side and then Marshawn on the other was how it was portrayed, at least around here. And with Percy Harvin coming in, he was kind of a Marshawn guy, or they liked him and they traded him, and that made Marshawn mad. So there was definitely some of that going on, for sure, at least from what we hear.
So, Chris, your legal background, I know you wanted to get into this a little bit as well. Chris Schreiber's with us here on Tiki and Tierney. Chris won our bracket challenge. He outlasted everybody. He nailed Carolina, and he nailed a lot of great upsets throughout, so he's with us here. The prize was a 20-minute chat with us on our show, which just happens to be our final show in this time slot. So let me ask you about, the Eli, fraud allegation with the merchandise, what you know legally. Early on, which side do you think has the advantage? What's captured your attention with that, my man?
Well, it's interesting. From what they're saying, if they have this email where Eli's asking for if I understand correctly, Eli's asking for stuff that looks game worn, and that is a piece of evidence, but it's definitely not dispositive. I mean, who knows why he wanted it? Who knows if he was just doing a favor for someone who asked him to get that? The real issue he'd face is if he were actually implicated in advertising it, doing false advertising, under the FTC. I believe this is for online stuff, correctly, or at least it probably crosses state lines. So there'd be interstate, federal issues going on. But the interesting thing to me about this is when you look at the NFL and you look at them stepping in, because all over my Twitter feed and my Facebook feed, there are a bunch of Patriots fans going, man, if this was Tom Brady, he'd already be suspended for 6 more games and all blah blah. And I tell you what, it's interesting to me that the NFL steps in and punishes players for things that are in the legal process. It makes a problem, I think, for the NFL. And when you look at these stories that come out, you have the NFL in its role as the arbiter of the sport. It's there to enforce the rules. So you have it giving the kind of suspensions and punishments like Tom Brady got for violating rules that are in violation of rules of playing, right? That are supposedly affecting the outcome. I know you guys have opinions about whether inflating a football would have affected the outcome, but there's at least an argument that it should have affected the outcome, or for PEDs that affected that, right? But then you have them stepping in and doing suspensions for things like Ray Rice and domestic violence, or for reckless driving and things like that. And so you end up with the general public, people like me or people like the audience, looking and saying, oh, well, how can you give a suspension for 2 games for PEDs and 4 games for this, but then you only give 2 games for domestic violence? And it's obviously not the same thing. And the NFL shouldn't even be in my opinion anyway, the NFL shouldn't even be in the business of stepping in a policing role.
Yeah, because it gets too arbitrary, right? There's no rhyme or reason behind what garners a penalty.
It's just not their job.
Yeah.
It undercuts their actual job of enforcing the rules of play.
It's interesting. You don't never think about it that way. And, the memorabilia world in sports it's kind of connected, and especially if the organizations, meaning the Joe Skiba, who works for the Giants, becomes implicated in this, and it proves to be this type of thing exists in a lot of the other teams, then the league itself that has an issue, right? I know that there's a lot of guys that are upset about things like this. Brandon Jacobs, if you go follow his Instagram account, he wanted his Super Bowl jersey, right? The Giants said they didn't have it. And so they ended up making him buy one and saying it was his Super Bowl jersey. It wasn't actually a Super Bowl jersey because someone else had already bought it.
The Giants lied to Jacobs?
Oh, man.
Really?
Go read Brandon Jacobs' Instagram account.
That's despicable.
Go read Brandon's Instagram account.
I'm going to.
It adds a different layer of context to this Eli story. It's really interesting.
Chris, I have something for you.
That's why I said it's not just some smoke. I mean, there's a fire raging somewhere. We just don't know where it is yet.
We should get Jacobs on the show. You know him well. Okay, so how about this, Chris? I look at all the things that flare up over the course of the last couple of years here, the length of games, penalties, nebulous interpretation of the rule book. I mean, we don't even know what a catch is at this point. Games ending late. Ratings decline. You seem to be right in the middle of the demo that the NFL needs. You're not young, but you're not old. You got a few bucks in your pocket because you're a lawyer, well-educated, and you're a fan. Have you grown disenchanted with the NFL enough where it's actually compromised your viewing habits at all? And if not, do you foresee that ever happening?
I have not. I think it's my favorite sport. It's the one that I will watch above anything. And I can't imagine myself getting so disenchanted just from things like the rule enforcement, because quite honestly, that just gives you stuff to argue about. Maybe I would have a different opinion if there was, something that came up that was like the tuck rule. I mean, one of the reasons I hate the Patriots is the tuck rule game when you have something like that.
One of many reasons.
One of many reasons, indeed.
Yeah.
But like you say, the nebulous interpretations of the rules, it keeps that human element in there. It gives you something to argue about. I want to see them institute certain things to improve the refereeing, to improve the judgment of the referees, like more laser spotting of the ball for first downs, things like that, where you say, okay, what we want here is just more accuracy. But there's certain things that are, because the rules are set up the way they are just judgment calls, right? There's rules that are based on accuracy, like was the ball here or not.
True.
And then there's judgment calls, like was this
like holding
a catch?
Yeah, or holding.
Was this holding? Was this pass interference?
Yep.
And I think just as a personal preference, I think they're going overboard in enforcement of some of those rules against the defenders in terms of targeting and whatnot. But I understand why, as a lawyer, why they're doing some of that, even though I think it kind of hurts the competition. But I would love to see them improve the technology to eliminate those type of errors, but at the same time, I can't fault them for having for still having judgment problems.
Okay. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Well, Chris, we appreciate you jumping on with us, man. Congratulations on the bracket challenge. And I have to tell you, my mom is impressed. She just sent me a text message. It says, "I really like the interchange with your bracket winner. He's good at this." So good job, Chris.
I know you guys don't normally or too often schedule extra guests in the last hour, so hopefully I get to brag that I was the ultimate guest on this version of the Tiki and Tierney show.
Well, listen, I'll tell you this. Not only that, we'll get you an MP3 or we'll get you a disc. We'll set something up with Santa. Get this so you can keep it, sit around. I mean, I don't know if you want to play it for your friends or just have it for your own records and have a little fun with it. But I'd have to say that you represented the Schreiber family quite well. And by the way, real quick, as you split between the Seattle Seahawks and the Raiders, will you go and watch a Raiders game in Vegas? You're not far.
Oh yeah, no, I will definitely do that. I mean, I feel bad for Oakland, but that franchise has already gone to L.A. when I was there, so I'll go to Vegas.
Okay, Chris, good job, my man, and congrats on winning the bracket challenge. Next year, we're moving to TV, so who knows? Maybe the stakes next year, you actually get to come on TV with us. So you got to defend the crown, man. Nicely done, Chris.
Thanks very much, guys.
Be good, man.
You got it.